Here's a quick look into today's episode.
While still doing company command, and I was like, okay, I can do all of those things, but I'm just going to have to apply to grad schools, and that's the next step for me. I had an awesome experience. The Army did so much for my family. I always knew that I wanted to go to grad school down the road, maybe start my own business, but I wanted that skill set that an MBA and business school would provide me. And I knew eventually the Army was going to say, hey, shake my hand, say, hey, thanks for your service. Go do your own thing now. I always thought about how important that transition is. I've seen guys get out of the Army without a great plan. With my dad struggle with transition. So my dad played in the NHL for 13 years, won a Stanley Cup. He was in his mid-30s, he retired, and he went from being a peak world-class athlete to making almost minimum wage working at Reebok, making shoes. And his line was always, you got to be smarter a lot longer than you need to be good at hockey.
Today's episode is with Mac Lalor. Mac is a phenom in the infantry and has been successful in everything he's done since growing up in junior hockey to being a captain in the Airborne Infantry, the 173rd Sky Soldiers, to the 75th Ranger Regiment, and now wrapping up his career in the 25th Infantry Division at the Lightning Academy. All the while, him and his wife Annie have created an amazing family and life for themselves. He'll talk about his early experiences in organizations with high expectations and how that set the standard for the rest of his career. He'll talk about family, relationships, leadership, and mentors, and how that impacted him throughout. He's going to talk about his transition in preparation for grad school. Most importantly, Mac's going to talk about being highly successful and having an awesome experience in the Army as he prepares to go off into the next part of his life. Now let's get into the conversation. Well, I really like to hear right off the bat, from you, what do you want people to think of when they hear Mac Lalor? What do you want people to remember? People that have known you for a while, or people that have no idea who you are in the first place? What do you want people to think of when they hear your name?
I want people to think that I was a good teammate. I think being in the Army and playing competitive sports my whole life, every endeavor I've ever undertaken, it's been a collective effort. And I think the people that you go through this journey with, if they're a team player, it's someone you want on your team when the going gets tough. And I think if someone hears my name and if they think, wow, he was a team player, he sacrificed for the team, he did what he did to help the team accomplish the mission, I think that's a high compliment. I think that's what I would always strive to be, is a good teammate, whether it's on the hockey rink, you're sacrificing yourself for the team, whether it's in training or on a mission, you're a good teammate. You're willing to sacrifice for the team. People want you on the team when the going gets tough.
Yeah, that's super common. A common theme from that we're hearing from a lot of folks is, one, they want to be a good teammate, but two, they want to be surrounded by people that value teamwork and teammates and people that have the same values, the same things that are important in my life are the things that are important in your life. Why did you choose the Army in the first place?
Chose the Army in the first place. I didn't first, it wasn't my first thought. Growing up, I never really considered joining the Army, and I think that was just my circumstances. My entire family's Canadian. I'm the only American in my family. And so joining the U.S. Army, it just wasn't the first thing that came to mind when I thought about what I wanted to do when I grew up. But I always loved watching Army movies and playing Army in the backyard growing up. But I went to a small high school just outside of Boston, Catholic school, and there was probably 60 kids in each grade. And I probably knew 20 guys that either went to West Point or the Naval Academy. And I just had a high respect for those guys. There was just something about them. Talking to them when they'd come home from break, if they were a few years ahead of me. And it wasn't until I got invited down for a recruiting visit down to West Point for hockey. It was my first year of junior hockey after high school. And I went down not thinking much of it, just thinking, hey, this will be one of the many visits that I go on, and didn't think much of it. But I went down there, and interacted with the cadets, went to class, shadowed the hockey guys, met the team, went to a hockey game, spent the entire weekend on campus, and there was just something about it. And being down there, I was like, I don't know what the feeling was, but I was like, I'm not going anywhere else. Like this is for me. I don't know. I think the combination of the history, the tradition, I think the seriousness of it too. It was like 2009, 2010 that I went for a visit. So right in the middle of the GWAT. And I think just being around those people, they were just such professionals. And I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I was like, if I'm in this environment, I think I'm better off. I think serving something greater than myself. I think I could see the challenge of it before me, and I was like, that's for me.
How old were you at that point?
I was 18.
So you're senior in high school.
Yeah, so I graduated high school in 2009, and then I played 2 years of junior hockey. And so after high school, just gap years, very common for hockey players going to play college hockey.
You're like the dude in Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. You know, that
Yep.
got the hours on the ice and played
February birthday.
You end up getting, better coaches, you get on better teams, and you just start exponentially outpacing all the other people in junior hockey.
And so that was...
And you're from Canada, your family.
Yeah. And so that was going down there with my parents too. I think they saw it in me too. They could just tell that was a special experience and that was something that I wanted to do, and I didn't really consider anywhere else. I was like, that's where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I did.
I wanted to, before we go too far into like some of the experiences you had and some of the people that you served with, I want to give a little spoiler alert, like what are you doing? What do they got you doing right now? How long you been doing this for? And what's like the biggest thing you got coming up in the next 6 months to a year?
Yep. So I'm Mac Lalor, captain in the Army, been in for about 9 years. Currently the Lightning Academy commander in 25th ID. So commander of Jungle School, Air Assault School, Rappel Master, Fry's Spies Master, and the division's pre-Ranger course. I've been in that position for about 2 years, been in company command for going on 3 years in a row. And I got a wife, Annie. We've been together for going on 8 years. Been together since my sophomore year at West Point. We got 3 kids, Jack, Sydney, and Harper, ages 6, 4, and 2. So we've had our hands full for a while. But coming up, so I'm transitioning from active duty to the National Guard and going to grad school, going to get an MBA. And we're moving back to New Hampshire as a family. Annie and I are both from the East Coast, so we'll be closer to family over there. But that's our next step. I've got 4 months before we leave island, another 2 months in command. So
Annie's leaving soon, right?
Yeah, Annie is leaving the end of March. I change out the first week of April, so she unfortunately won't be able to come to the change of command, but she'll be starting her job as a nurse practitioner at the hospital on campus where I'm going to school. And
what school are you going to?
Dartmouth's Tuck MBA program.
Yeah.
And I'll have all 3 kids with me as I try to transition out of active duty and move halfway across the world back to
So
the
Annie's going home and get stuff settled on that side.
Yeah.
And you'll be back here with 3 kids, changing command.
Yeah.
Getting out of the Army and then flying all them back.
Yep. Annie's going to be Advon. She's going to go start work, and I will have all 3 kids. And
do you have anybody helping you with that? Like, who's going to be your teammate?
My mom's coming for about a week and a half in April. My brother's coming out at the same time, but when come May, it's just me, and he's going to be working full time.
It's you and on that plane.
Me on the plane with the 3 kids.
Wow.
I just got to make sure they all get on the same flight and we all get from point A to point B.
Yeah, that's an experience. My family going from all the moves that we've had, going to Italy, going from Italy back, coming to Hawaii the first time, going back. No 2 moves have been the same. They've been different every time. And so for all of you that are out there that hear this, between now and then, Mac, you better get a lot of help. And you got a lot of people like us that are going to be there for any of those things that come in those days, those unpredicted circumstances, right? Like a baby getting delivered,
Yeah.
you never know what's going to happen. But what I can tell you is that the quick reaction force of the Leclercs and all the people that care about you guys that are out here in Hawaii, we would be disappointed if you ran into a situation and you didn't call on us. We would be disappointed if we found out later on that you didn't let us help in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know we've got a great group here in Hawaii that's that hopefully can help if we need it. I know the kids they're gonna be crazy on the way out, but just got to make sure everything goes smooth as possible.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be surprises.
It's got me thinking so much about like all the little techniques that every Army family has done with these moves, with the iPads or whatever it is to kind of keep them smoothed over, packing snacks, all that stuff for these long flights.
Yeah, I think the standard for parenting on the flight home is probably going to be a little lower. I just got to survive with the kids.
Keep them alive. Don't lose one.
Yep, that's the goal.
Don't injure one. Don't lose one. Okay, so maybe a little bit back to like why you joined. You talked about like West Point, but how was some of your first experiences, those first couple years at West Point? Some of the people that started to influence you, the teams. How was those first couple years?
First couple years at West Point were an eye-opener. I just finished my second year of junior hockey, where hockey's the focus. I took one class a semester just to keep my mind going at the local community colleges around my junior hockey team. And so I went to West Point, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to play hockey, and I'm going to do fine academically. Everything's just going to be just fine. And I showed up and my 6-week grades came out for my first classes, and I was dangerously close to not staying at West Point. And that was an eye-opener for me. I think I underestimated how difficult balancing the military with academics and a Division I sport all at the same time. But I had a great network at West Point. The hockey team was phenomenal. My instructors were phenomenal. Getting those 6-week grades was a real disappointment, but it was eye-opening for me. I knew that I couldn't get through this alone. And so I had to go to two instructors and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I want to be up here. Right now I'm down here. Like, can you help me get there? And just seeing how much effort the teachers put in to me as a student and as a cadet, and then seeing just how much the team rallied around me to help me stay, whether it was making sure that I got down in time to do my homework, or some of the smarter guys on the team helping me out, helping me understand certain subjects. That was eye-opening for me, and that was reassuring that was the right place for me. After freshman year, I got into the groove, was able to get myself into a good place, and finished up the last 3 years. But it was always just a challenge. I don't think it ever got any easier the last 3 years at West Point, but I think I just got better at managing it. And throughout my time there, I just remembered how helpful people were to me, and I tried to pay that forward. I would see, as a junior or a senior, as one of the captains, seeing one of the freshmen come in and struggle. It resonated with me, and I would make sure that I would go out of my way to make sure that guy was taken care of just the way I got taken care of. And so trying to pay it forward to guys. So I had great leaders, great instructors at West Point, and I think it only helped me become a better leader being around those types of people.
And you were the captain of the hockey team for how many years?
Junior and senior year. So assistant captain junior year, captain senior year.
Yeah. And so there's leadership right there. You're leading you're the captain of a team. You're leading a team of your peers, right? In sports, you were probably leading, and you were some form of leadership at West Point as well. So it doesn't get easier. You just get more responsibility, right?
Yep. And I think being the captain, I think getting the first taste of peer leadership, I think showed me just how difficult peer leadership can be. You have guys that we all came to West Point. We had played 2-3 years of junior hockey together. We're all coming to West Point 20, 21 years old. You got your seniors who are 23, 24 years old. And you have to balance that leadership. Like you have to work extra hard to convince your peers to rally around, build a certain culture on the team. And that was difficult. But I thought that was probably one of the best leadership experiences I could have had, because I got to my first unit as a lieutenant and I turned to my squad leaders, like first day, I tell them, hey, we're going to do this. And they just went and did it. And I was like, whoa, you guys just need me to tell you what to do? You guys just went and did it? That's so much better, easier than pure leadership.
Yeah. I think that one of the reasons it comes easy is all those years of peer leadership, right? Ranger school teaches you to how do you work amongst your peers, right? A lot of us I went ROTC, everybody at ROTC was at a different place in their life, in a different place in college. Some of us had kids already. Some people had part-time jobs. Some people were struggling in school. Some people had more difficult majors than others. And so when you get a group of 20 to 30 people together, they all require slightly different types of teamwork and leadership, right? And then all of a sudden you get out to a unit, and maybe things are a little bit easier. They seem a little bit easier. You got different variables, obviously, with young soldiers when you showed up there. After West Point, what made you choose infantry?
I think just being on competitive teams my entire life, I just didn't think of anything else. It just seemed like a natural fit. Like I loved being on the hockey team with a group of 20, 30 guys working towards a common goal. And it was really the guys in the room that were going to get the job done. And to me, infantry was that. You had your platoon, the guys in the room with the weapons that they have and the resources that they have, and that group has to get the job done. And it just seemed like that wasn't present in every branch. And for me, I wanted to grow as a leader. I wanted to become a better leader. And I thought the only way to do that was to challenge myself. And I think infantry brought that challenge. There was the certainty that you were going to go to Ranger school and have that challenge, and then to lead a platoon. And that was the other challenge. And the only way for me, I thought, to become a better leader and to grow as a leader was to go infantry. And it just seemed like such a natural fit. And
how did things work from leaving school? You got infantry. Now you're going to go to Fort Moore. And then there's the gambit for infantry officers, which is a combination in the different orders of Ranger School, Airborne School, Pathfinder, all those things that happen at Fort Moore before you go to your first unit. And sometimes you know what your first unit is, and sometimes you don't know what your first unit is, or sometimes it's not the same. What was your experience when you got to Fort Moore?
So coming out of West Point, I branched infantry, and my first duty station was going to be JBLM. And so I go down to Fort Moore, I go through IBOLC, go through Ranger School, and I think I'm going to JBLM. And Annie and I are all excited because we've heard great things about Washington and JBLM. And coming out of Ranger School, I got a random email and got surprised with the opportunity to go to the 173rd, to go to 1503. And I thought I had some time to think about it and consider it. And so I called Annie, and she was a nurse at the time in Boston, and called her, was like, hey, might get this opportunity to go to Italy. And she was like, I called her at work. She's like overwhelmed at work as a nerd, like working hard, probably not having the best day. And she was just like, I can't even talk about it right now. We'll talk about it later. And I was like, okay. She was like, what's the deadline? And I was like, well, it didn't sound like it was it didn't sound like it was right around the corner. Like, I think I have some time to think about this and get back to him. And the next day I get another email, and it's like, Lieutenant.
Who's these emails coming from?
Captain Will Ryan. Yeah. And he was a company commander in 1503. And he followed up with another email the next day and was like, hey, check your RFO, you're coming to Italy. And I was like, oh man, like that's awesome. I'm so excited. But now I got to tell Annie that we're going to Italy.
Yep.
And so I called her, and I think the surprise of it, she was like, what is going on right now? Like, what is the Army? Like, you think you're going to the West Coast, and now you're going 9 time zones to the right in a matter of 24 hours. But we ended up, we were super excited.
Did you have a relationship with Will Ryan from school or from before, or how did he know you?
He knew me. So his younger brother was a senior at West Point on the hockey team when I was a freshman. And so his younger brother was someone that took care of me my freshman year, that I really looked up to. And so I never met Will, but I had met him once a couple years prior to showing up to Italy. Just met him once in passing at an event. And that was it. And that was the only interaction I had with him. But I think he heard that I was coming out of Ranger school and was like, hey, let's get him over to Italy. And
so the truth behind most of these stories and the statute of limitations is well beyond. So I'm comfortable sharing it is, we had a process over there in Italy, and that process we had sources in multiple places. Like we had a first sergeant that was a prior ranger that was working at the infantry basic course, and every class I would say, first sergeant, who's the top 4 junior officers coming out of Bolick right now? And he would give me the names, and I would send an email to those 4 folks if they were not already on orders to come out there. And the reason is because not everybody that was coming to the 173rd graduated airborne school. Not everybody that came through there graduated from Ranger school. Not everybody that some people got injured. Some people's lives changed and they decided, I don't want to go to Italy anymore. I would like to go to 3rd Infantry Division in Georgia. And so it worked out in a lot of cases for other folks as well, who wanted to switch out instead of going to the 173rd. They went to JBLM. And so, there's a lot of recruiting that comes in that. Yeah, we had some sources that from West Point and from the teams, from the people that were going there, that said, like, who are the people that are doing really well, that are interested in coming out to a very challenging. Because we knew what our mission was. We knew what we were doing over there. We were deploying. Russia had just invaded the Ukraine and went into Crimea. We had companies in Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland. We were doing missions, training with those folks on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and we needed folks that could come in and immediately handle that type of situation. And so when we got your name, you and some of the other folks that you came out there with, we were very aggressive in making sure that we got those folks coming out there.
I think seeing the type of culture that coming to 1503 is my first duty station, show up to Italy. I think right before I showed up, I got an email from you as the battalion XO, and it was like, Lieutenant Lalor, welcome to 1503, best battalion in the Army. And you're going to have, in other words, like you're going to have high expectations. And this is what I expect of you. You'll see all the attachments in this email. You will read and you will study every single one. You will read all the books on the reading list. And you will read all the policies and everything. And you will know this the first time you show up. Like, basically, like, what are your questions? And at the time, like, I didn't know. I just got out of Ranger School, just got out of IBOLIC. I didn't know what a battalion XO was. And I was like, I don't know what I'm getting into, but I'm not going to not read this stuff and study it every single day. I'm going to go in because I don't want to find out what happens if I don't do it. And so every day leading up, I studied that. I knew everything like the back of my hand showing up to Italy, because I could tell that there were high expectations of junior officers coming in. And so I showed up to Italy, and I get picked up at the airport by the battalion S1. The unit was up in Poland during a training exercise. You were the rear D commander. and I get brought to your office, and I'm locked up at attention, and I'm talking. You're asking me. You had known my background too, but you set the standard. You let me know what the expectations were of me. And I think you knew I played hockey in college, and you were like, did you play any sports in college? And I'm like, yes, sir, I played hockey. And in other words, you were like, no one cares. You have to earn your reputation here every day, and you cannot rest on the fact that you were a college hockey player. And I was like, all right, okay, this is a good wake-up call, getting to the first unit. But after that, there was no change. The unit came back from Poland, and the standard was the exact same. You had lieutenants that were such high performers that there was this culture of excellence in that unit. And I think like the lieutenants that I looked up to, like you had your Robbie Wrights, you had your Josh Biggs, you had Brian Callahan, you had all these guys that were just, I watched them and I was like, you guys are something else. Like you guys, like I thought I was in really good shape as a D1 athlete. Like, man, look at these guys. I got to work every day to keep up with these guys. And that was everything. That was, you had to be the best at PT. You had to be prepared for every single brief that you went into. And if you wasted people's time with a brief that you were ill prepared for, or if you asked an ill-informed question or anything, like if you were unprepared for an LPD, like your peers let you know, and you never heard the end of it. And I think it forced you to raise the bar and to stick around, because you were like, I don't want to let these guys down. Like I'm going to be prepared for everything, every field exercise, every brief. I'm going to be prepared because I don't want to be the one dragging these guys down. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such an awesome culture to be a part of. And you had Colonel Wagner, you had Major Cross and Colonel Cross, you had Captain Ryan, who ended up being my first company commander. First sergeant, you had those first sergeants, the Lions of First Rock. Like it was such an amazing group, and I don't think there was a better organization that I could have come into as a junior officer than 1503 in 2016.
Yeah. Pull on a little bit of like some of those relationships, right? And the relationships that, you know, when you think about it, you're like, okay, this is tough. The expectations are really high. It's hard, right? It's stressful to be in an organization where those are the expectations, right? We're jumping out of planes. We're deploying to different countries, small units, right? So the risk is high and the expectations are high. But that developed some relationships that you've had for life. Right. I think one of those persons you were just with a couple days ago, maybe yesterday, right? Somebody that we served with out there that has been out of the Army now for a few years, but your relationship that you developed in that unit, all right, at the first unit, it's still to this day, right? Who was it?
Yeah, Lieutenant Richardson. So Asia Richardson, she was our company FSO and attack company when I showed up as a lieutenant. And great friend Annie and me, and we've kept in touch with her over the years. She was field artillery. So she PCS'd.
She was one of the first field artillery women to come be an FSO. I think she was one of the first in the whole Army. We were the first ones the 173rd was the first unit to have women start serving in combat arms, right? And Asia was one of them.
Yeah, and she was a top-notch FSO. And she's been out of the Army for a few years now, but she was in Hawaii just on vacation. And so Annie and I went down to Waikiki. Haven't seen her in 7 years, but you pick up just where you left off, and it's crazy that the last time we saw her was over in Italy.
Without skipping past the 275 stuff, when you showed up to when you found out you were coming back out to Hawaii, who happened to be your sponsors?
And you were here as a battalion commander. Recognized you. Some of the guys that I knew from Ibolic and Ranger were already here.
Yeah. I just remember getting a Facebook message, and I think Annie sent a Facebook message to Christy and was like, where should we live if we come out to Hawaii? And those things don't change. I think some of those relationships that you have with people, they don't change. But you had an opportunity after First Rock to go to another special organization.
Yeah. So after First Rocks, we'd been there about a year and a half. Was fortunate enough, got the opportunity to go to RASP 2. Again, just a a high-performing organization, and was fortunate enough to get through RASP 2, went to JBLM let's see, we had just had Jack 4 months before, so we PCS from Italy to JBLM with Jack as a newborn. We get there in May of 2018, and I get 10 days of permissive TDY, and we're ready to get settled with Jack as the newborn, ready to get settled. And I get a call from one of the battalion S1, and on the first day that I'm on ground, and he's like, "Hey, you on ground?" I'm like, "Yes, sir. I'm here. Just flew in." He's like, "All right. There's a change of plans. You are taking a platoon tomorrow, and you have platoon live fire tomorrow."
Tomorrow.
And I was like, "Whoa, all right." It was a little bit of a shock, but I was so excited. I was like, "This is why you join organizations like this. This is why I joined the Army." It was a surprise, but I was like, yes, this is why I wanted to come here. And then I had to explain that to Annie and how it was such an awesome opportunity. And I don't get any more days of permissive TUI, but I get to take a platoon, and I was like so excited. Went in, did platoon live fire, and it was with 3 Bravo out of 275, and so just started it off. That was a learning lesson for me. Just went right from platoon live fire right into platoon sticks, right into a company FTX. It was like 2 weeks. I didn't even know what planet I was on. It was just one thing right after the other, and the shock of learning these new systems and all these new, I don't know, the weapon systems, what the capabilities are, the differences, and just getting adjusted to it. It was a great way to get thrown into it, because I made a lot of mistakes as like my first 2 weeks in 275, but it was great to learn those lessons right up front, as opposed to being there for a long time and then slowly learning them. I just learned them all at once, but it was.
And it's there was a lot of things that were different, right? There was a lot of Rangers that were serving in the 173rd, but our equipment in the 173rd was significantly different. Not all the fancy equipment in the 173rd during those years, right? Because the 173rd was scheduled to go away right before Russia invaded Crimea, and then it grew instead of going away. It grew. A lot of different techniques in the Rangers than what we were able to do in the 173rd. It just had to be different mission, different equipment, different techniques.
I will say, being in the 173rd, though, a lot of the leadership came from regiment. And I think the culture of excellence that you had in the 173rd was, you saw that in 275. And so the step up from the 173rd to 275, I think from a cultural standpoint, wasn't a huge step up. I thought both units were absolutely phenomenal. And so it was nice to go to 275 and be like, oh, wow, this is where a lot of that comes from. You have the NCOs who have been there forever. They've been on a million deployments the last 15, 20 years. And just the knowledge and the experience of those individuals to learn from was just such an awesome experience.
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to pull out is the similarities between those organizations, to where you did have people who had built up a lot of time in that organization, both those organizations. They were skilled. They had the right attitudes. They understood what their tasks were, right? You had jump masters that were experienced, that knew how to be jump masters. But they don't get that way without a leader enforcing it, right? So the only way to have jump masters with 65 jumps is to log more jumps, to schedule those jumps, to get people out to the DZ, to get them into jump master study courses, right? It's just the same thing with Ranger School. Like, you've got to get these people, young privates, to get them studied, to get them to school, to get them through pre-Ranger, to get them into Ranger School, so that they can come back and then become a sergeant. So sergeants can then become squad leaders, they become staff sergeant, right? You have to breed them from the beginning. When people show up to a unit and the first thing they complain about is, we only have 3 jump masters in the company. Well, make more. Like, you're not going to be given more. You have to make more, right? You show up to your unit and you're like, how many Rangers do we have in the company? And they're like, we got 5. Well, if you subtract the officers, we have 3. Well, make more. You can't just go ask for more. You've got to make more. And I think that is the common thing that I've seen in the units with that culture is they don't ask for more resources. They create the resources. They create the people that they're looking for. These are the type of team leaders I want. These are the type of team leaders and squad leaders we know we need. Let's create them. Don't just beg and say, I need Ranger qualified people who are already jump masters who are doing this. No, make them. Make them.
I showed up to the 173rd, and I think the unit got back from Poland 2 weeks later. So I met Will Ryan and the team, and I go to First Platoon and Attack Company and Will Ryan's company, and I get told that, hey, everyone is going to compete for jump master slots. And Will Ryan was like, hey, you guys are going to learn pre-jump. And I think we started the jump master cert like the next day. And I didn't remember all of pre.
You probably had six jumps. You probably had 6 or 7 jumps at that point.
I had, I think, 5 jumps and just got out of airborne school. And I look at this script. It's like a 20-minute brief of pre-jump and all the nomenclature. And I'm like, I could learn this by tomorrow. And like, I did as best I could. I didn't do that great. But I was like, you know what? Hey, I'm going to give it a good shot. Learned a lot, but did not meet the standard. And I was low on the OML, and a few of the other officers in the company were low on the OML. And we got called into Captain Will Ryan's office, and he was like, are you guys serious with your OML for jump master? Like, I don't care if you've been here for 1 day or you've been here for a year, you guys will be at the top of the OML. Do you understand? And I was like, understood. Like, yes, sir. And like, that's what I focused on. The next like couple weeks, I made sure that I knew pre-jump word for word, and I did it so many times in front of Annie that I think she can probably still recite pre-jump to this day. And I studied so hard for that. And that's just because it was the expectation. Like, hey, you're an officer, you need to lead by example, and you're not leading by example at the bottom of the OML. Like, it doesn't matter if you're there for 1 day or you're there for over a year. Like, this is the expectation, and you need to meet that expectation. And I mean, those are high expectations, but I think it was just such a culture of excellence that I was like, I'm going to do this because I don't want to drag the battalion down. I don't want to drag the reputation of the officers down by being at the bottom of the OML. And so I'm just going to study this.
Yeah. And when people like ask, or people think like, why did you create that organization? Like, why did you create that culture? Why were you enforcing standards that were, in some people thought, unrealistic? Well, when I was growing up as a young Ranger, like, everybody had to contribute. Everybody had to be ready to help rig each other up, right? Before a jump. You needed as many people to be able to do the jump master pre-inspection. You needed as many people who were qualified, but it wasn't just the people that were qualified. The people that had 7, 8, or 9 jumps, although they're not ready to go to jump master school, we need them to learn actions in the air. So when you're on your way to the ground, you don't collide with somebody and you do it properly. And so by the time you do get to your 12th jump, your 13th jump, now you can recite these things. Now you know the rules. You're a contributing member of the team. And now jump master school becomes, it's easy. I know what I know. By the time we get to that point where I've given that opportunity, I know it. I can say it. I can recite it. I've been held to this standard since the day I got here. And the same goes with the Ranger standard, which is you don't all of a sudden learn to run 5 miles in 40 minutes. It's 5 miles in 37, 38 minutes from the time you show up. It's always the standard. It's not, I'm getting ready to go. Now is time to start studying these things, right? And that's how you build the culture, a culture of excellence, a culture of, that's how you keep people safe. That's how you make sure that when you do a jump with 600 people, less than 1% of people get injured. On the flip side, if you're not that good, if you're not doing that good in those things, and you exit 600 people from the aircraft and 10% of your people get injured, do the math. That's a lot of injured people that we have to take care of on the ground. We don't want our people to be injured, right? And so we trained to those standards for an absolute reason. Because I think people, I think I kind of want to just get right back to that, is the point of the culture and how you create an organization where people are excited, where they're excited to show up in the morning because they know they're going to do tough PT. They're going to show up because they're going to learn something. They're going to be developed as a leader. They're going to go in to do some live fires. They're going to be doing situational training exercises. And they're doing what they joined the Army to do, right? This is what I signed up for. Was, in this unit, I joined to be a paratrooper. I wanted to be in the infantry, and we're out doing what it is we joined to do. What made you continue on with it? Like, what made you stay? Because at that point, we're starting to get to the point where your commitment, you've committed, you've done what you need to do, and the point is, what kept you around? Like, why did you and Annie decide to stay with the Army for a little bit longer?
Yeah, coming out of West Point, I wasn't sold on a 20-year career. I was just like, hey, we'll take this 1 year at a time, one step at a time. Going over to First Rock, I just had such an awesome experience, such a great experience. Made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of lessons, but I think overall I achieved that goal of becoming a better leader, and just wanted to continue that and wanted to continue to challenge myself to become a better leader. And I had an awesome first company command team, Will Ryan and First Sergeant Aldridge, together in First Rock. They were phenomenal. Just the standard and just absolute professionals. And I looked at Will Ryan and I was like, you know what? He has had such a positive impact on people since I've been in this company for a year. And I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I don't know if I want to make the Army a career, but I think I want to do company command and maybe have a fraction of the impact that he had on people. He had a personal impact on me. I saw him have positive impacts on everyone in the company. And I was like, you know what, if I can do that, like I'd like to do that. I don't know who knows what I want to do later in life, but I was starting to hear, being in my first unit for a year, you start to hear stories of your other buddies that you went to school with who are now at their first unit, and they don't have a great experience. They might not have good leadership. They might just have a bad first experience as a PL or as a lieutenant in whatever unit. And I would hear those stories and I'm like, man, that's not me. I've got it. I'm lucky to be able to have this type of leadership and these experiences. And so I saw Will Ryan and the impact that he had. And I was like, you know what, I want to do company command. I don't know what I want to do later, but that's it. Whether I stay in the Army or not, I think company command would be a great experience.
Yeah. What I want to pull from that is that there's a lot of leaders that are trying to figure out things like, what could we be doing right now as a leader to help the Army with its recruiting and retaining talent, right? That's something at every level. The people that work for you, if you can help develop them and help them achieve what it is they define as success. What do you think success in life is? What do you think success in the Army is? And let me help you get there. If it's, I want to go to schools, let me help you go to school. If you want to get some college classes, let me help you get some college classes. If it's you want to do hard training, let me help you with hard training, right? If it's you want to get in better physical shape, I'll help you get in better physical shape. Help them achieve what they define as success. That's what leaders can be doing. Don't be the leader that your other friends were having, right? Don't be the company commander that everybody hates, and they hate for what reason, right? Or don't be the first sergeant that just everybody despises. Don't be the person that when they see you in the PX or they see you at the commissary and they turn the other way, right? That's the simple thing. Like, they're walking down. Do they smile when they see you? And then they say, hey, that's my company commander. Hey, do you see that's my first sergeant, or that's my platoon sergeant over there? Or do they run the other way? Because they know you don't care about them, or you're not challenging them. So I just want to I wanted to harp on that a little bit.
Yeah, I've, and not just Will Ryan, but I've had great leaders throughout the Army. Had Colonel Shaw come take 1503 as I was the training officer. He's the one who blessed off on and let me go to RASP 2. And so Annie and I, we have Jack over, we have him on Christmas Eve up in Aviano, Italy. and I take the, whatever it was at the time, 10 days of paternity leave. So I basically didn't miss any work. I just came back to work after block leave. But we have Jack, and Colonel Shaw's not around. And I'm like, where's Colonel Shaw? And he was recovering from, he was getting chemotherapy, and I had no idea. And
so you had Dave Ahern at the time.
Dave Ahern.
He was everything, right?
Yep. And he was in the 3-shot, again, absolutely phenomenal leader. Then you have Colonel Shaw, and Colonel Shaw he's undergoing chemotherapy back in the States in the hospital, and he's going through all this, and he's texting me advice for RASP-2, checking in on how my prep is going for RASP-2, seeing how I'm doing and all this. And I'm like, you have all this going on, and he's
getting chemo.
Yeah, and you're still checking in on me, just a lieutenant in your battalion. Man, I don't know. I was
it sets the example. Once again, it sets the example for when you get out to be a commander, or you become the first sergeant of a company, and we have a tendency to treat people and do the way that we were treated, right? Or if we were treated poorly, we say, okay, I'm not gonna allow that to happen. Nobody cared about me. Nobody was checking in on me. I'm going to do the opposite, right? Yeah. But you could just simply follow the lead of those folks and the first sergeants, the Aldridges. You had, I think you had Sergeant Major Mullinax at the time, right? So if you just wanted to know what right looks like, just look at your first sergeants and your sergeant major.
And I think I was just so lucky to be surrounded by that. My first platoon sergeant, I showed up, got a platoon, first platoon, Alpha Company, and Sergeant First Class Benji Castro was my platoon sergeant. And someone who had done every single deployment with the 173rd, had, I think, 100 jumps, all with the 173rd, 5 Purple Hearts. I showed up and I was like, what? This guy's my platoon. And he was just such a phenomenal leader. And to just be surrounded by that, I just felt like I was just trying to take it all in and try to be better because of it.
Yeah. And so we take all these lessons, right? So we're, enough loving on the 173rd and, in the Rangers, and you take these cultures. So then you come out here to Hawaii and you've spent the last few years out here in Hawaii. How has that experience been? And let's start going in the direction of, now you got family. Now you're on your third kid. And you're going to be on your third when you're out here. Yep. And let's talk about those couple of years here in Hawaii, and then that'll get us going in the direction of big decisions. Yep. Big decisions on what to do after the Army.
Yep. And so come out to Hawaii in August of 2020. We are mid COVID, and so Annie and I get to the island, and the COVID restrictions were a lot. We could not leave our hotel room for 2 weeks. And so we have Jack, who's 2, Sydney, who just turned 1, and then Annie's pregnant with Harper. And we were in the same room for 2 weeks. And I think there needs to be a whole nother podcast just on
on that story.
Just on that. That was a lot.
I'll get Andy to tell that story.
That was a lot. And then I get out of quarantine and I go to LTP over at JRTC for 10 days. And so Annie's still in the hotel. But again, I've never had a bad boss. And it was more of that when I got to Hawaii. And I'll give one example. Go to LTP at JRTC. Obviously, Annie's not thrilled being in the hotel, pregnant with two kids, and all the COVID restrictions in Hawaii. Come back from LTP. We got about 10 days before we go back to JRTC for the CTC rotation. And right when I got to the Brigade 3 shop as a brigade planner, I go to the Brigade 3, and I hated to do it, but I was like, hey, sir, in October, a couple days before the box starts, I'm supposed to be the best man in my childhood best friend's wedding back in Boston. And I was like, hey, it would mean a lot. I understand the COVID restrictions and all that. It would mean a lot if I could go there. Maybe go forward with the unit to JRTC, do all the orders and the RSOI and everything, get everyone out the door, go up to the wedding, fly right back down a day and a half later, and then head out to the box before the box starts, like the day the box starts. I was like, I'd like it would mean a lot if I could do it. And the Brigade 3 was like, hey, I'll ask the brigade commander, Colonel Mayo. And we get back from LTP and he's like, hey, Colonel Mayo, like it's denied. You can't go. You can't break the COVID bubble. Like the unit was not supposed to interact with anyone outside of the unit, and you would potentially go up to this wedding and bring COVID back to everyone who's in this protected bubble at JRTC. And I was pretty devastated, but I understood. I was like, hey, that makes sense just with all the restrictions. So we get to JRTC for the CTC rotation, almost no sleep, just rowing my heart out as a brigade planner, kicking out orders, getting ahead of stuff, a lot of MDMP. And it was the day before we're supposed to go out to the box. And I run into Colonel Mayo, and I had met him a couple times, but he walks up to me. He's like, hey, I know it's your buddy's wedding today. And I just want to say it ate me up not being able to send you, but that's the decision I had to make as the brigade commander. And I was speechless. I could not believe that a brigade commander in charge of 5,000 people, thousands of pieces of rolling stock, the performance of this brigade is on him at the CTC rotation. And he remembers that it's one of his brigade planner's buddies' weddings that day. I was speechless. I was like, I didn't even know what to say. I was like, thanks, sir. Like it just couldn't, my mind could not comprehend that he would remember that and then take the time to go up to me and explain that. I was like through the roof, and I was like, I don't care if I get no sleep for the rest of this rotation. I'm going to do everything I can for this organization because this is Colonel Mayo's brigade and because he is that much of a stand-up person.
Yeah.
And so that meant a lot to me, just to have one experience like that. And that was the norm for him. Yeah. And like he would come down, he'd do PT with a platoon, and he remembered like specialist first names of the kids, like just that type of person. And I think that trickled down. And I thought Second Brigade was just such a phenomenal unit. I was lucky enough to do company command for a year under him, and it was great. And that experience just laid the groundwork for the rest of my time here.
And when people have similar situations with people like Colonel Mayo or Kevin Williams and Rick Turner and the people that we served with, and there's hundreds of those stories. Everybody's got a story about, one time where somebody cared a ton about them and it impacted. The thing is that they didn't just decide, Neil Mayo didn't just decide when he became a colonel that he was going to be that type of person. For years, he had been paying attention to people's names, paying attention to what was important in people's life, going up and talking to people and saying, hey, I heard that, I know your grandma's sick. I know your mom's sick right now. We're going to get you home in time to get you to go see her before she passes. And he knew those things. Like they didn't just decide, like when you become a battalion commander, when you become a company commander, you start learning these lessons early on and you start practicing on them. How can I do that for people? How can I do that for the people that I'm in charge of as we start to move forward? So now you got family though, right? Family is starting to get to the point where family is going to start influencing some of these decisions. How did the next couple of years go? And when did we start considering grad school or something outside the Army?
I think coming out of CCC, coming to Hawaii, I knew I wanted to go to grad school. I didn't know in what capacity, whether it was through one of the scholarships or the fellowships. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I always knew I wanted to go to grad school. I wanted to get an MBA. But I knew I wanted to do company command. And so I still wasn't 100% on getting out. But I think as Annie, like as she starts to go from being a nurse to a nurse practitioner, and she's in school full time, and we have 3 kids, started to consider it more like, hey, how can I support Annie's career? How can I get stability for the kids? How can I go to grad school and prep myself for the eventual transition from the Army, whenever it is? And I think it was during my first company command, I I made the decision. I was like, okay, I want to transition. I want to somehow be able to support my family, the kids, go to grad school, have stability, flexibility in my career, while still doing company command. And I was like, okay, I can do all of those things, but I'm just going to have to apply to grad schools. And I got in, was lucky enough to get in. I was like, you know what? I think that's the next step for me. Not that I had a bad experience in the Army at all. Like a lot of my peers will get out of the Army and they're salty and they didn't have a good experience. But for me, I had an awesome experience. The Army did so much for my family and me. But there was this, I always knew that I wanted to go to grad school and down the road maybe start my own business. But I wanted that skill set that an MBA and business school would provide me.
That's not the first time that Beggin' Kevin gets right outside the door and starts squawking. I think he hears us sitting in here having a conversation, and he's just trying to be a part of it. What was it about the Army and like looking forward? And you were like, maybe the Army wasn't going to allow me to have that consistency. Maybe the Army wasn't going to allow me to support, Annie's. What was there anything like that made you feel like you weren't going to be able to do that with the Army?
There was, yeah, there was a little bit, and I think we got the first taste of it over in Italy. Annie had been a nurse for 3 years, and we get over to Italy, and the surprise of going to Italy, I was like, "Hey, let's do it. This is going to be an adventure," and didn't know Annie couldn't work.
Yeah, Christy same way. She couldn't. Christy was an RN and couldn't work off post.
Yeah, and Annie made the most of it. She taught workout classes, spin classes for the 2 years that we were there. But that was 2 years that she didn't get towards her professional experience.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give her that certainty. She's been so supportive of me in the Army. And I wanted to be able to give that back to her. Hey, here's some stability to be able to pursue your career as well. She's made a lot of sacrifices. The kids have made a lot of sacrifices. Yeah, moving around a lot, and I think that's what I wanted. And I knew eventually the Army was going to say, "Hey, shake my hand, and say, hey, thanks for your service. Go do your own thing now." And I always thought about the transition, how important that transition is. I've seen guys get out of the Army without a great plan, without a transition plan. And I see them struggle. In my own family, I've seen like my dad struggle with transition. So my dad played professional hockey for 13 years. He played in the NHL for 13 years, won a Stanley Cup. He retired when I was 6 years old. And I watched him retire he was in his mid-30s. He retired, and he went from being a peak world-class athlete to making almost minimum wage working at Reebok, making shoes. And I watched him struggle, and I watched him, the effort that he had to put in to make a good transition. I watched him do his homework, doing night classes at Northeastern. I watched him, he was a personal trainer on the side, working at Reebok too, and all the effort that he had to put in to support our family going from that transition from professional hockey for so long into like the workforce. And he and my mom ended up starting their own workout studio, and they've been doing the same thing for 25 years and have a great business.
Where they live right now?
In Needham, Massachusetts. Yeah. And so same house that they've been in the last 27 years.
What team did your dad play for?
So he started out with Montreal, won a Stanley Cup with them in 85, 86. So with all those rookies, Patrick Waugh, all of those guys. So we won the Stanley Cup his rookie year. Then he played in St. Louis for the Washington Capitals, Winnipeg Jets, San Jose Sharks, and the Dallas Stars. And he retired in Dallas when I was 6.
And you must have moved around a few times with him?
Yep, moved around. We moved to Dallas when I was 3, so I don't remember the move to Dallas, but I just remember his last 3 years in Dallas, just going to all the hockey games and watching my dad play in front of 20,000 people, and just like that's all I knew. I was like, hey, my dad plays hockey. Like, I love hockey. Like, that's what I want to do. I just want to play hockey.
How did your dad, other coaches, mentors, leaders, how have they reacted when you said, this is what I want to do? This is kind of the direction, these some of the decisions that you made. How did they help you?
Well, my dad growing up, he'd always say two things, like, work hard. You don't know when good things are going to happen, but they're going to happen. It might not be today. It might not be tomorrow, but just work hard, do your best, and good things are going to happen. And then he would always tell us, like, after he retired from hockey, like, hey, you guys love hockey, but eventually hockey's going to end. And his line was always, you got to be smarter a lot longer than you need to be good at hockey. And he would tell it to me all the time. And he would always just say, focus on your education, because eventually hockey's going to end. And that's what you're passionate about. And you got to find something else to support you and support your family. And so growing up, I always thought, like, hey, eventually hockey's going to end. And hey, if I don't play professionally, like, I want hockey to be able to, I want to play as long as possible, but I want it to be able to set me up for success. And so I always wanted to go to a good college to play hockey. I got to do both, which was great. And I think my dad's emphasis on getting an education, helping with that transition when hockey does end, I think set me up to always be aware of it, even as a 6-year-old kid, just knowing, hey, someday hockey's going to end, and you're going to have to be smarter a lot longer than you need to be good at hockey.
I can see how easy it is to apply that. You're going to need to be smarter. You're going to need to be prepared, because someday the Army is going to end for all of us. And we need to be prepared for what type of life we want to live after that, right?
Exactly.
That's huge. I love that you're talking about your dad. Who's been there for you recently?
Yeah, I think deciding to go to grad school, Will Ryan was a big mentor for me, because he left the 173rd and went to Yale and got his MBA through the Army. But I just knew that he kind of navigated company command and then on to an MBA. And so I always kept in touch with him about it and always told him, like, hey, I kind of want to do maybe something similar. And so he wrote me my letter of rec for business school. And he's been someone that I've just been able to pick his brain over the years and learn from. And he was super supportive with grad school applications. Another leader, so General...
Well, with Will Ryan, the whole time Will Ryan was at Yale, I was pimping him for... I wanted to see the syllabus. I wanted to see the reading lists. I wanted to see the questions that Stan McChrystal was at his strategic leadership. I don't think that was the name of the class, but it was a leadership in chaotic times type of class. Anything that had to do with leadership and anything that had to do with Stan McChrystal or the MBA, he was sending me articles. He would send me like the pre-readings, and I'm getting no credit for any of that stuff. Yeah. But I was reading those things, and I shit you not, like I started feeling, I was like, I can do this Yale thing, maybe not everything. He's been a huge part of my life too. Like, me and Will have stayed in touch. It's not just people that are maybe more senior to you. Like, you can learn something from, as a senior leader, you can reach out to some of the junior officers, junior NCOs that are out there getting these special opportunities and say, hey, can you share some of that stuff with me? Yeah. Share an article. Yeah. Share the reading. What's the reading list? What kind of questions? What'd you get out of class? What did Stan McChrystal say today in class? And he's like, here's a link to what he had to say. Yeah. And I listened to it like it was a podcast.
That's awesome. So at the Lightning Academy, my jungle platoon leader, he was, by the time I got to Lightning Academy, he was already transitioning out of active duty. So he hit his 5-year mark. And he ended up going to Harvard Business School. And so he's there right now as a first year. But he's a brain. He is so smart, but he cares and he helps people a lot. And he's a great mentor for his soldiers at the time. And he even helped me. He gave me, we'd talk like interview tips, because we were both applying at the same time to schools. And he was super helpful with helping me with interviews and some of the application process, just these tips that he had learned from maybe some other mentors that he shared with me, and were very helpful.
And then you trickled that down to some of the NCOs that were there, that were with you, right? Because I know of one NCO in particular who interviewed with one of my best friends, George Sterling at Google. So I got a text message that same day from George that said, hey, I just did an interview with your boy. Wow, he was so impressive. And he crushed it. And I'm sure you guys helped Decker get ready for that interview, and now he's off doing that internship with Google, right?
Yep. And yeah, Eckert was one of Colin's guys too. And learning, just seeing how Colin had mastered this. And it's no surprise that he's at Harvard Business School right now.
Yeah.
Before he left, I was like, hey, we got to share this with the company. We got to share some of this knowledge that you have, because who knows, maybe people won't apply to business school, but they're going to do job interviews later. And some of the tips you've given me are so helpful that I want to share this. And so we did LPD for the company, and it was a Colin Stone. He was his last week in the Army, and he did this big LPD for the company for like 3 hours just on interviewing for a job and best practices and techniques that you can use to convey your story during an interview to make you the best candidate possible. And I thought that was an awesome parting gift that he gave the academy, doing something like that.
And if you have an open mindset, you can look at that and say, I'm not getting out of the Army, but I will at some point. Or if you want to interview for some other organizations, these interview skills and the skills that I'm learning and the education are going to make you more valuable to get those positions that you want, or to be a better leader. When you go down the street and you become a field grade officer and you become a sergeant major, and you're like, and you understand these processes because you've invested some time in learning some skills other than just the basic, things, because that's what it's all about. Like, people invest in us throughout our careers, and I'm noticing the trend with you is everywhere you go, because you got that open mindset. You get surrounded by these people. You see these people. You're able to recognize it. You're able to kind of gravitate towards them. You're surrounded by phenomenal people, right? That's what we are. We are the average of the 5 people we spend most amount of our time with, right? And that's what you're constantly doing. And I don't think that you're going to change that when you leave here and you go up to Dartmouth. You're going to surround yourself with phenomenal people, right? That you're going to learn something from and continue to push forward. Anything more with leaders and mentors and coaches through this process?
I think so my decision to get out of the Army, I brought it up to my senior raider, maybe a little over a year ago, maybe like 14 months ago. I had applied to schools in the in the summer of 22, and I got in, and I deferred for a year. Annie's nurse practitioner program, there were some admin issues with her clinical hours, and what it was going to look like if I went to grad school that year was we move as a family, get to Dartmouth, and Annie's basically going to have to start over her nurse practitioner hours. And it was like, that is going to be stressful. And so I threw up a Hail Mary. I told the school, I was like, hey, I'm coming regardless. I'm coming to Tuck, but here's my family situation right now. Like, is there any way I could defer for a year? Let Annie finish that out so that I can be focused on school when I get there, and not our family arriving in shambles trying to piece everything together right when like recruiting starts for business school.
Yeah.
And they were super supportive, and they were helpful. And I talked to General Van Antwerp, who kind of owned the Lightning Academy at the time, and I told him what was going on, and he was like, yeah, I'll write you a letter of support to Dartmouth. Do you want to stay at the Lightning Academy for another year? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And just having supportive people like that, Colonel Katz, Colonel Patton, HHBN Commander and DeVarty Commander, just so helpful. See a lot of my peers get out and they say, oh, I felt like I was in the doghouse as soon as I brought up I was transitioning off active duty. But not me. I just felt so supported along the way. Yeah, I was almost surprised that like I never got treated bad. Like there's been people who outside of my chain of command who kind of have sneered at it, or it's like the first thing out of their mouth when I see them, and it's like, hey, whatever. There's going to be people like that. But the leaders that I've had, just so supportive of me and my family, and can't believe that it just worked out the way that it did. Dartmouth said, yeah, no problem deferring. Happy to support Annie and you guys. We'll see you in the fall of 24. So I know I've known about like being admitted there for like 13, 14 months. And it's just awesome to see down the road, know where I'm going to go, know that my family's getting supported like that, and then have leadership here that's able to support us. Just incredible.
Yeah. Your story reminds me of Brian O'Connor story. Brian O'Connor went to school with you as well, right?
Yep.
I think he was a couple of years after you, but Brian, he was in the Rattlesnakes with us, and he got into, I remember when he was doing all his interviews and he was doing all of his training, and he told me about his situation, and he said he wanted to stay here in Hawaii, do this process, and then leave the Army in order to go to it. Would I allow him to do it? I said, absolutely. And when I said, absolutely, I'll support you, he then turned and gave twice as much to the organization. I remember him he did his interview for Chicago Booth through a camera at JRTC, camouflaged in the field, because that was when the deadline was and you had to do it. It was like in between the exercises. Chicago Booth business school was so impressed with the fact that a soldier was camouflaged when they were doing it. He tells a story awesome in Trivius Caldwell's Live Everything podcast. He tells that story about him and Danielle recording the video and like getting it out there to them. And then he got back and got into school, and now he's out there crushing it. He's got a phenomenal life right now. But not only did we support him, but then he supported us, and he says, I will give everything I can to the organization up until the day I leave. And he went to JRTC with us and he crushed it. Whereas sometimes the people that have a bad situation, sometimes they do it to themselves, right? They have a closed mindset. They just assume that everybody's going to say no all the way, right? They assume and they say things like, the Army screwed me and the Army told me I couldn't do it. And I often say, no, the Army didn't tell you. A human did. Somebody else did. And sometimes you did that to yourself. Sometimes you didn't even ask. Sometimes you didn't come up with a way to make it work, right? How do you present a solution to the chain of command or to your leadership? That's what they want, right? Is they want somebody with a creative solution that says, not only do we get that, but now we can use you, Brian, to everybody in the Rattlesnakes that wanted to go to grad school, follow Brian's lead. He'll show you how to get in. And that's what he did up until the day he left. He shared with everybody on how to do it. This is how you get in. This is how you get through.
Yeah. I remember seeing him at JRTC, and I knew him from school. He was, I think, maybe 2 years behind me. Mm-hmm. I just saw how hard he worked, and I knew that he was transitioning and applying to grad schools. But I was a brigade planner. He was the battalion planner for the squadron. And just seeing how hard he worked, I'm like, man, just an awesome guy. Like he's not the jaded type. Like he's the go-to guy in 214 Plan Shop right now. And he's given everything he's got. And I was like, that's awesome to see that.
It's the culture thing, right? Yep. That's the teammate that you want to be around. And you're not always going to be you're not just going to be handed Mac Lalors. Like you got to turn lieutenants into people that you are today. So how do you get them? You take the people that you have in your organization and you train them and you teach them and you embrace them and you develop them. What I want to get into now is what could leaders be doing right now to help with retaining talent, with developing talent, specifically in your case, developing talent, which is giving people opportunities to be prepared when their time comes in leadership or to decide whether or not the Army is them for long term.
That's a good question. I think recognizing that everyone's unique, that they have their own life, own family situation. And I think being able to figure out what motivates the people, I think is a great way to kind of inspire them. Who knows if they'll want to stay in the Army, but if they feel supported by their leadership, I think they're more inclined to support the organization and for longer. I look back at when I got to First Rock, like my first unit, just formative years for me, and just being around high quality people and having the expectation be so high that I had to constantly strive to achieve. I think having goals like that help me, motivate me to stay in. I think you might have units where that's not always the case and there's pockets of negativity. And I think just as leaders, we need to be aware of that and stomp it out and don't let that become the culture. It's unfortunate, but you might have people in an organization who we're like, hey, why do more? Why go above and beyond? Why shoulder more than your share of the task? Like, I've heard comments like, hey, you get the same paycheck if you get a 450 on the ACFT than if you get a 600. Why try to strive for more? It's understanding that, hey, there could be individuals there that aren't motivated, and making sure that that's not the loudest voice in the room, that that's not the culture in the organization. And I think just leading by example, rewarding excellence, recognizing excellence, I think is a great way to make sure that the motivated people and the high performers know that they're making an impact, and that they're doing the right thing, and recognizing that, rewarding that, I think helps retain that culture. And I just see that from my experiences in First Rock and 275, and now out here. Like, that's something that I'm always aware of. I'm like, hey, I want to create positivity in this organization, and trying to stomp out those pockets of negativity that might be pervasive within the unit. I think that's a challenge, but as soon as that becomes the loudest voice, like, that becomes the norm. And so getting ahead of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think as people, everybody wants to be a part of something special. They want to be a part of it. Sometimes they don't always want to do all the things that it takes to be a part of that special unit or that special team, the work that it takes to make the hockey team, to make the baseball team, to make it to the NFL. You know, they would love those things, but do they have the skills? Do they have the size, to be on those things? But we want to be a part of these special teams, right? The one thing that they all have in common is high standards, teammates holding each other accountable for those high expectations of each other, pushing each other to the next level. As soon as we start accepting average and being comfortable with being mediocre, that's not special anymore. And the people that do want to be a part of something special, I don't want to be a part of that average organization anymore. And I want to be held to a higher standard. I'm going to go seek out a team or a unit that feels that way, that has that culture that I'm searching for. And if we create that kind of culture, if we create those kind of teams, everywhere we go, people are going to want to be a part of it. They're either going to want to stay with that unit for a little bit longer, or they're going to want it when they do leave the unit, they're going to say, hey, are you looking for a challenge? Are you looking for something good? Are you looking for something to be a part of something special? Then I know a place for you. It's called the Army, right? Or it's called this unit in the Army. I had a great conversation with George Sterling, Brian Burlingame the other day. And what they were saying is the common thing that people have after the military is the relationships at which they had with the people that were in those units that are the tightest. And the people that have those relationships, it's always from an organization that had high standards, that had high expectations of each other. That's when those relationships were the strongest and they were built. It never came from an organization when it was average. And they're like, well, that's where I made all my best friends. It's not the case. It's always from that tough team, that tough situation, that combat deployment where we had high expectations. That's the separation between the great units and the average units, is that there's a lot of people that would be very surprised to receive an email about, hey, welcome to the Rattlesnakes. Here's the expectations. Like you're coming to one of the premier cavalry squadrons in the Pacific. And I did the same thing. I did the same thing that we did in First Rock in the Rattlesnakes. And there were some people that were a little bit shocked when they showed up as a second lieutenant. And they're like, one, how did you know I was coming to your unit? Two, how did you have this stuff prepared for me? And it was a system that we developed that I had learned from First Rock, that I had perfected. And Pat Wilkins taught me how to do it, right? And how do I send out the battalion commander's expectations? And then I turned to the S1 and I taught Bailey Bolin how to do it. And she would send an email to all the senior NCOs and junior officers that were coming to the 214. And I was like, what do you mean we don't know who they are? Well, how can we do sponsorship if we don't know who they are? We're just going to wait till they show up. And then on day one, we're going to say, here's the expectations. And they're like, I'm not ready. Here's what we're going to expect of you when you show up. Here's the documents, the SCO's documents.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the same thing in the 196th. I'm going to do the same thing. And guess what? I don't expect that they're doing it, but we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And people are going to be like, if you get picked to go to the 196, you're going to get an email from Colonel Leclerc or from somebody in his team, and they're going to say, these are the expectations. I thought I was going over there to get ready for retirement. I thought I was going over there to take a knee. And instead, they got higher standards than where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, get ready for it.
And that'll be no surprise to Paul Hanneman.
And if that's not what the kind of organization you want to be a part of, then we don't want you. So kind of landing this plane like here, what I'm really looking forward to here and how the next 6 months and the next couple of years go for the Lalors, because that's the kind of relationship that we've had. I've known you since you were a second lieutenant. I remember recruiting you to come to the 173rd. I remember when I saw your name to come out here to the 25th Infantry Division. And I remember when they said, like, hey, these are some of the people. I think it was through the AIM process when they threw those captains' names and they were like, hey, does anybody know any of these people? And I was like, Mac Lalor, put him as number one at the top. I can't remember if it was Colonel Williams or Colonel Mayo at the time. I think it was Colonel Williams. Where he brought us in and he valued our opinion and he said, do you guys know these people? So relationships and reputation is huge, not just in the Army, but outside the Army. So I'm super excited to hear how things go for you guys, because, our families will always be close from our times in Italy to our times out here in Hawaii. And, I think there's one story it might have been right after COVID. It might have been the middle of COVID where you guys were getting ready to have your third baby, and Christy just happens to be delivering babies at Tripler, and I think we got a phone call while you were at work.
Yep. So I get a call. I'm doing change of command inventories and about to take over Seco 127 and 2nd Brigade in 25th ID, and Annie gives me a call. She's about 39 weeks. And she's like, hey, I think it's happening. I was like, oh, all right. So I run home, and it's probably maybe 1400. And I'm like, all right, let's go. We got to go right to the hospital. I don't care. We are getting right in the car and we're going, because our first two, Annie had very quick labors. We got to the hospital in Italy on Christmas Eve with about 5 minutes to spare before Jack was born. At JBLM, we got to the hospital with the same amount of time. We didn't even make both times. We never made it into the L&D room. We got to the waiting room basically, and they were like, "All right, get her to the closest bed. She's having the baby right now." So coming to Hawaii, I knew the third one probably going to be a quick delivery. And I saw that we were 25 minutes from Tripler Hospital. And I was like, that's not going to cut it. It's what can I do to prep for it? And so I just started watching all these YouTube videos on how to deliver a baby in the car, assuming that maybe on the way, I would have to deliver the baby on H1 in Hawaii. And so we go right down to the hospital, and Annie's like, I want to walk around. I want to make sure that I'm ready. I want to get moving a little bit before I go and get strapped up in the bed. And I'm like, okay, can you please just go inside? And she's like, nope, we're going to walk around the Tripler campus. And Christy's working in the L&D department at the time. And Annie's texting her, and we must have walked around for an hour and a half. And it's starting to get dark out. And I'm like, can you please just go inside and just get checked out? And she's like, I don't think I'm going to have the baby right now. The contractions aren't as strong as they were a few hours ago. And I'm like, just go inside. And she didn't do it. And we probably walked around for another hour. It's dark. And I'm like, can you please just go inside? And again, she's like, I know my body. I'm not going to have the baby tonight. Let's go home. We get in the car, and as I put it in reverse, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, we're just going to have the baby at the house. It's going to happen. And I didn't say that out loud, but we drive back to the house. Annie's mom and aunt are in the living room. They're watching Law and Order. And we walk back. Annie's tired from walking around all day. And she goes up to the room, and she goes to hop in the shower, take a tub, and she's like, Mac, my water just broke. And I'm like, oh, great. And so I call your wife. I call Christy LeClaire from Annie's phone, and I'm like, hey, Christy, I think Annie's water just broke. We're back at the house. Like, do you think we have enough time to go to Tripler, or do you think we should just call an ambulance? She's like, call an ambulance. I'm leaving my shift right now. I'm on the way. And so I'm like, all right. So I hang up the phone. I call 911. I'm like, hey, this is who I am. This is my address on base. My wife's going to have the baby. And she's like, oh, nice. Can you describe the contractions? And I'm like, no, I like see the head. Like I am about to just catch this baby. And so I catch Harper, and we're in the bathroom on Wheeler, in our house on Wheeler, and all watching all those YouTube videos. I knew what to do, and I'm talking with the dispatcher, and I hand Harper to Annie, and I go and I grab a drawstring out of my favorite gym shorts, and I tie off the umbilical cord, and Harper seems to be doing all right. Annie's doing all right. Then I realized that, like, I'm like, where are Annie's mom and aunt? Like, Annie was just in labor upstairs screaming, and now there's a crying baby. And I'm like, Annie's mom and aunt were just in the house. Like, where are they? And I yell down, and I'm like, hey. And they come scurrying up the stairs, and they come around the corner of the bathroom, and the look on their face when they saw that we had a baby in the bathroom within like 4 minutes of being home, like they almost fainted. But the next person to come through the door was Christy LeClaire. And she made sure that as the paramedics were getting set up, that like Annie was getting taken care of. So she was the first person who saw Harper. And it was just such a special experience and such a wild story that.
Well, when you called her, she was right outside the gate, and she was coming down the street, and you called her, and she said, call 911. And as she came around the corner, she said, there's the ambulance, and the lights were going. She just tucked in right behind the ambulance and followed. And she goes, I'm not exactly sure what house there is, but I know this ambulance is going to it. And followed the ambulance to your front door, and then came in right behind them. And they're like, can I help you? And she's like, I'm here to help. What an awesome experience. What an awesome story. It is for forever. Our families will be like that. We'll be close. And before you know it, Harper will be having a baby, and you guys will be telling stories, or you guys will be helping her prepare for something like that.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to have like I wanted you to kind of get, this has been awesome. It's been great to hear from you. You got such an awesome story. You got such a unique experiences with the Army, and so many great things that you guys are going to do outside the Army, and be, advocates for the Army for life. And the amount of people that you have created inside the Army that are going to be that example, that are going to be the Mac Lalor for that when they're a company commander or they're a squad leader, that you learned from Will Ryan, that you got from Mike Wagner, that kind of went all the way up the chain, right? I want to give you like the last, the last couple words, like what advice or what thoughts do you have for like, for those of us that are continuing to serve, senior leaders, those that are going into some leadership positions, and then some of the people that are serving right now.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you just to the leaders that I had in the 173rd. You, Will Ryan, Colonel Mike Wagner, all the leaders from 173rd that just gave me those formative years as a lieutenant. All the experiences and the leaders that I had in 275, just seeing a high-performing organization like that and being able to contribute to that and be a part of it. And then coming up to the 25th and having a phenomenal experience as a brigade planner, rifle company commander, and now the jungle school commander for a couple years. Just great experiences and great supportive leaders along the way. I think getting out of the Army, transitioning from active duty to the National Guard, I think the people that are going to be the best recruiters are the ones who were in the military, who had a positive experience. And although I'm leaving active duty, like I feel like I've had a positive experience, and I will continue to talk about my experiences in the military to hopefully inspire some people to either join or stay in or just contribute to something greater than themselves. and I'll use my story as an example of being a part of a great organization and then having great leadership and what that can do for someone and their family.
Thanks for listening today. I hope we sparked some thoughts about the people that have inspired you to be who you are today. I hope you share some of your thoughts and better yet, demonstrate them for the people in your life. Our pursuit is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories stacked on top of each other, building like compound interest. Keep stacking these positive habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Please share your comments at the links in the show notes and DM us at Teach Me to Fish podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.